morning. I'm Joseph Saleck, the music director here at the Everyday Center. And this morning it's a pleasure to be welcoming back Michou Landon. She is a reverend with the Church of Divine Light, affiliated with the Boulder Psychic Institute. She leads Qigong, yoga, and meditation practices. She has a blog and occasionally does editing. And she's recently published her second volume of poetry, Parable in Michou, available at Amazon and on the back table after service this morning, as well as her first book of poetry. So Michou has been sharing her presence and music with us starting initially back in November of 2020, starting on Zoom, and she's sung probably every other month and many times every month, and it's been wonderful to work with her all these months. She's a wonderful lyricist, and this morning we're sharing 2 new songs, and she has written the lyrics to both of them. And this first song we're going to do, we haven't talked about the title, but is it called How Blue is the Vast Eye?
We have How Deep at the top.
Okay, How Deep. Okay, it's called How Deep, and it really fits in perfectly with the story Patty told. Please join me in welcoming Michou Landon. Space reaches into my heart. How blue is the vast eye of the sky. How deep that space reaches into my heart. How blue, how deep, how vast, no strife. How vast, how deep, the pulse of life. How blue, how deep, how vast, no strife. How vast, how deep, the pulse of life. How blue is the vast eye of the sky. How vast into my heart. How blue is the vast eye of the sky. How deep that space reaches into my heart. How blue, how deep, how vast, no strife. How vast, how deep, the pulse of life. How blue, how deep, how vast, no strife. How vast, how deep, the pulse of life. How vast the blue sky. How deep the pulse of life. How vast the blue sky. How deep the pulse of life. How vast the blue sky. How deep the pulse of life. How vast the blue sky. How deep the pulse of life.
Let's see, how many other sounds can I make up? Mm. Well, Joseph and Michou are now ensconced in the back of the room, still having not quite become accustomed to receiving their gratitude. But that's all right. I'll catch them later. And speaking of receiving gratitude, and thank you so much, Patty, for your acknowledgement of all of those who participate in making today everything that it can be, because I guarantee you it's not just me. And I'd like to add some others, because without Denise for Lizzie attending to everything, but the technical aspects of our service, we wouldn't have it. And so even though we do our best to acknowledge her in every way that we can, I wanted to make sure to acknowledge her this morning. I also want to acknowledge Sandy Decker and Gay Doman. Now, some of you may not know who they are, but they are so critical to the behind-the-scenes activity that happens following Sunday service. They aren't always, would you two stand, please, just for a second, so everybody can recognize you? And don't tell me that you are standing. Because they are the ones, and their team, because they have a team of counters. Matt is a counter, Jackie is a counter. We have a number of our board members who are counters. Carol is a counter. They are the team that takes the blessing that we say over the gifts that we receive. They take it to the next step, and they prepare it to make the trip to the bank. And that's no small thing. The consciousness that they bring is no small thing. And we are deeply grateful.
Thank you.
It really does take a village. And so I appreciate you participating with me in my acknowledgement of everyone. We have a lot of board members here this morning. And today was a day when even my magic wand and my crystal ball would not tell me how many people were coming. Of course, I don't have a magic wand or a crystal ball, but I could. And because things are getting a little iffy out there in terms of meeting in person, right? So I appreciate very much all of you being here this morning, wherever you are, on Facebook, hoping that you're in your jams, which I would probably be, and on YouTube, on Zoom, well, soon to be on YouTube. And by the way, if you ever want to hear a talk again, or hear, because with original music, as is being performed this morning, we record it with the talk. So if you ever want to hear something again, or catch something again that you thought you might have missed before, our YouTube channel is the place to find it. So what's our YouTube channel? It's Everyday Center for Spiritual Living. All right. So I think all of the commercial announcements are out of the way. Other than to remind you that I am Rev Ann Rea, and I am the commercial announcer for the Everyday Center for Spiritual Living. So let's get down to basics. Last week, we talked about the thing itself, right? The thing being the one, the life, God, Spirit, the universe, and all of the other terminology that Holmes came up with and that all of us come up with and that others in the world come up with to try to give a name. There are 1,000 names for God, and none of them capture all that it is. So in the beginning, when Holmes was talking about the thing itself, the point that he wanted to make was that the thing itself, this one life, this one power that we speak of so often, is everything. And in Patty's reading this morning, which was so exquisite, the little shoot that was coming out of what had been supposed to be a chopped down tree, the little shoot that was rising is the thing itself. The irrepressible is the thing itself in us. And it isn't conditional. It doesn't matter if we don't feel irrepressible, because it still does, because that's what it is. It's like if we weren't in the mood for peanut butter, some of the funniest things just drop in out of the blue. If we weren't in the mood for peanut butter, would it stop being peanut butter?
No.
Would it get sad?
No.
Or depressed?
No.
Or wonder what's up? No, it just is peanut butter. And if you're not a peanut butter fan, just substitute your own thing. So, today we're talking about the way it works. And I was reading again the section of the Science of Mind that I'm speaking from today. And I was laughing out loud. And I know, I won't even try to tell you how many times I've read this book, let alone these 4 sections. And I know I didn't find the humor in it before, but it made me laugh. And what made me laugh was that once we come to realize that whether we're hungry for peanut butter or not, that peanut butter is still peanut butter, and it is still hanging in with us, and it is still all that we are, and it is still ready at a moment's notice to go into action to create something better or something worse or something neutral. It is always the truth of our being. It is the truth of our being. Center, circumference, unconditional. So what did I find so funny? So Ernest Holmes is talking about and he spends a lot of time in this section. By the way, if you haven't read it lately and you have a copy of the book, check it out. And if you don't have a copy of the book, go online and just type "The Way It Works, Ernest Holmes" into that little blank space where you type things. What's that called, Carol? A URL thing? Anyway, where you put information to search for stuff. Type in "The Way It Works, Ernest Holmes," and it'll come up for you. And then you can read it for yourself. And the point that he makes in this section again and again is it works for us the way we work it. Now, that's not the language he uses. He says, "It is done unto us as we believe." And it did not originate with him. He also quotes Jesus as saying, "It is done unto us as we believe," and it didn't begin with him either. That understanding has been captured by great teachers from the beginning of time, because they noticed that there was an action and then there was a reaction. There was a cause and then there was an effect. So in 20 different ways, he says, "It's done unto us," Ernest Holmes does, "it's done unto us as we believe." And he points out, and this is the part that made me laugh out loud because I had never read it this way before. And, well, I could get sidetracked. But anyway, he says the two key words in that statement are "as" and "believe." Now, why would "as" be so important? Why would "as" be so important? And by the way, those of you who are taking the class, you're getting a sneak preview. "As" is so important because it belongs to us. It's not done for us. It's not given to us. It's not something outside of us. It's ours. As we believe. Not as somebody else believes. At least not in this philosophy. It's not as somebody else believes. It's not as I believe. It's not as Carol Rose believes. It's not as Denise believes. It's not as somebody else believes. It's as we, as individuals, believe. Now, why do you think that's so important? So one of the things that we're going to do in the class that's coming up, that's starting this week, is my intention is to get some questions answered. Your questions, your questions, your questions. And is now a good time for me to remind you that the class is free? Because the questions come up all the time. I'm praying. I have others praying. I'm doing everything that I can think of. I'm staying in my lane. I'm doing everything that I can think of, and yet blah, blah, blah isn't changing. Or hasn't changed the way I want it to. So, could I please just let you know that if something isn't changing the way we want it to, there could be more than one reason for that. If we are asking for something to change in a way that will not benefit our life and not be life-affirming, we may have to change our mind about what it is that we want to have change or how we want it to look when it does. Let's say, for instance, that we think the only way that we can advance in our job is for someone else to lose theirs. I've had clients who have come to me with that idea because they cannot allow, and one of the words that Patty used again and again today in her reading is allow. They cannot allow life to have a bigger idea. They cannot allow that person to prosper and them to prosper too. What a thought. It is not a win-lose life. Because if somebody has to lose for us to win, we've missed the point. And even the winning will not sustain. A house divided against itself, as it says in Hebrews, and Ernest quotes it in this section, a house divided against itself what? Cannot stand. Cannot stand. So we really do have to find a way to all get along. Or at least be respectful. At least listen. Okay, so back to the way it works. Talk about listening. So this life, this power, this presence, this one is the greater consciousness. And why am I saying greater? I'm saying greater because it doesn't have anything about it that is conditional. It doesn't have anything about it that is limited. It doesn't have anything about it that for it to even consider the possibility of limitation or condition is the antithesis of what it is. And let me remind you that what that it is what we are. Whether we want peanut butter or not. So the way it works is that it listens. It listens. Among other things, because it's always very busy. But it listens. It listens to what we think and how we feel about it and how sincere we are. And even though Ernest Holmes gives a lot of emphasis to the word believe, starting with it's done unto us as we
Believe.
Very good. 4 of you get gold stars. I have been having a realization that belief is not enough. So just hang in with me while I talk about this a little bit. There are lots of things that we believe. We believe the sun's going to rise in the morning, even if we can't see it. We believe that our car will start when we put our key in the ignition, or we push the button, or whatever it does when we think about it, whatever it does these days. We believe that our key will unlock our front door. We believe that certain people will show up when we need them. We believe lots of stuff, you know? We believe that Smith's will have Best Foods mayonnaise on the shelf, which is not necessarily so. There's lots of things that we believe. But is that also true about our faith? Because the difference is, faith is in the unseen. Faith is, to have faith is to trust. Okay, I didn't tell you to put on your seatbelts. But to trust in what cannot be seen, what cannot be known, what cannot be explained, what cannot be justified, it is to trust. That when we say all is provided and our life is the life of the one, when we talk about that, we don't just talk about it. We trust it as much in this room as we do when we get in the car, and when we go to work, and when we're with our friends. And the trust, the thing about trust and faith, and Holmes speaks of belief this way, is that there is a measure. Now see, you knew it all along. There is a measure of what we create in our mind, or in our mind, and with our intention. There is a measure that differentiates between belief and faith. Faith is irrepressible. Faith is speaking our word, saying our intention, speaking our truth, and letting it go. Not continually looking. Is it here? Is it over here? No. Does it look like this? No. Not continually looking for proof. It is in my mind, our greatest challenge as human beings. To have that level of unwavering faith. So this is how it works. Is the consciousness, the energy that is life itself, takes what we give it in the way that we give it, in the measure that we give it. And what I mean by that is if we give it unconditionally, if we just speak our word unconditionally, then that's exactly what comes back. It may look a little different, but sometimes divine creativity gets in there and has a better idea. And if we give it with doubt, with fear, with our committee wanting to have all these things to say about, well, that's not likely, and you know, who are you to believe that, and what do you think you're doing, and anyway, if we give it conditionally, if we give it with doubt, if we give it with fear, if we give it believing that we aren't good enough to warrant having this experience, to warrant having a life that's free of struggle, then we're not. And it's not. How many of you grew up hearing the phrase, well, it must not be God's will? God doesn't have one. Let me say that again. God does not have a will. Because God is not, as Patty read in her reading this morning, God is not a person. There's no will involved. It wants for itself, as us, to live the best life we can. And that best life is up to us.
Amen.
We can rag on anybody we want to. Y'all know what I mean by that, right? We can blame and we can shame and we can say if only, and because of that or them, this is going to happen. Okay. If that's what you want your experience to be, then you may have it. This is me pretending to be God now. Okay. I love you. I have always loved you. I even love the idea of you. And I will always love you. And you can have it however you want it. We are all keenly aware of the conditions and circumstances that are causing hardships for people right here in our own backyard, let alone in other places in the world. Why is that happening? Is that because they don't believe it can be better? Then how do you explain, if anybody thought yes to that question, How do you explain the people who come out of those circumstances or are even in those circumstances who are thriving? How do you explain that? And they may not have enough food, but that may not be what it takes them to thrive. And they may not have the warmest shelter, but that may not be what it takes them to thrive. We are putting our idea of someone else's conditions on them.
Yep.
We have to stop that. We have enough to do with ourselves.
True.
We have enough to do right here. One of the most important things that Ernest Holmes says in this section of the book, out of including all of the other things that I've already mentioned, is that we can experience as much as we can allow. So what's that mean? That means that if we want more of something, bring a bigger bucket. You don't show up to all of the provision for all of the world with a thimble. Because why would anybody do that? Why would we show up with a thimble? Because we think that's all we deserve? This isn't about deserving. There is nothing we can do to be more deserving. And there is, hang on now, there is nothing we can do to be undeserving.
Amen. Right.
Period. So bring a bigger heart, bring a more open spirit, bring the willingness to have a new kitten. While the little chocolate lab is being born. What in the world am I talking about? Carol Rose's experience of celebrating having a new kitten as a first step. Thank you all so much for your attention, for your presence, for your willingness to just take in my passion. There is nothing I want more for us all than to get it. And so it is. Oopsie daisies. Nobody says oopsie daisies anymore.
So I just wanted to say something. The song we're going to do now is new. The song we did before Ann's sermon, actually, Joseph wrote that expanding from a line he found buried in my first poetry book. And I actually had to ask him when he presented these lyrics to me, like, where did you find that? And so, yeah, and once he told me, I had a good laugh. Anyway, but I just wanted to clarify that. So.
You don't need the mask.
Hmm?
You don't need that mask.
Oh, you're right. Thank you. Where to go in this vertigo world, this centrifugal world? I sigh and try to drop to the eye in the center of the swirl. And from this place, vast inner space, in the belly of the whale, I meet the face that illuminates and liberates the nightingale to fly beyond the maelstrom, above the battleground, between the wings of wisdom, compassion pouring down. There's no stasis here in this human sphere as we ride the spiral's curl and try to steer. The road disappears as the mystery unfurls. So we root the feet, give the mind a seed. Why race the river's flow? The ride is sweet where the channel is deep and the heart knows where to go. High above the maelstrom, beyond the battleground, dolphin song of freedom dispels all other sound. In this new year, we are gathered here to remember why we've come, just what we bring